So thank you everybody for being here today. It's really nice to see familiar faces coming each week. So thank you if you've come to past workshops or if you're new here, welcome.
Welcome.
I'm here with Rebecca Trujillo Vest from Pandion Music Foundation as well,
Hi,
and
everybody.
Ryan and Carol. Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Um,
Welcome, Ryan.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So I'll give a little information about Pandion Music Foundation to start us off. We are a 501(c)(3) nonprofit, started a year ago from October, hosting these workshops weekly on Wednesdays, with different industry professionals leading as mentors and helping to break down the barriers between professionals in the industry and emerging independent artists who are looking for information to build their careers and build more sustainable careers. That's our mission, is to help give free access to this information that can help make music careers more sustainable for artists in today's industry, as so much has changed and it's hard to make a living these days, hard to find community, and it's hard to just access information and education if you don't have the privilege of financial support for bigger courses. So we wanted to kind of make this more accessible to all. And then we also have Pandion Unplugged now, which is on Tuesdays at 9 a.m. Pacific time, which is a wellness live stream on our Instagram page and Facebook page, to build community around wellness for musicians, which is lacking in the industry and unfortunately a large problem and challenge for many people. So that's kind of creating more of a community to share about experiences and gain tools, also led by guests each week. And help to, again, make our careers more sustainable in that way. And yeah, so that's what we're focusing on now. We have some partnership events and other events in the works for this year, so keep your eye out. And if you haven't signed up for our newsletter, you can on our website. I'll drop a link in the chat in a minute, or our creators circle, which is on Facebook. So
Yeah,
that's a
and,
nice
and
place.
since you brought that up, Jordan,
Yeah.
I'll talk about this at the end. But Sip and Soup is here on Friday at Earth Star Creation Center in Venice Beach. We're partnering with 2Indie, and I'll tell you more about it at the end of our workshop. But we still
Thanks.
have spots if anyone wants to fly to LA and come and meet and sip and soup. Sip with us with the supervisor, and we'll tell you more about who the supervisor is, and we'll even have Sonnet Simmons showcasing a couple of songs so that night. So if anyone's interested, or if you're in LA, please think about coming, and we'll tell you more about it in a bit.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, that's a really great event for networking and just to meet people in LA, the LA area. So if you're in LA, great opportunity, or if you have the ability to fly out. And then we also, if you stick around till the end, we'll also be sharing a disco link today, that you'll be able to submit one mixed and mastered radio ready song for Ryan if you want that to be included in a little disco playlist that we're going to create, and it will be there for Ryan to use if he chooses, and for other music supervisors to discover as well. Because if you're not unfamiliar with disco, they've just started this library feature cut pretty recently that allows supervisors to access music that has been made public in the disco platform. So we make these playlists public for anyone to discover. Um, so I'll share that link with everybody at the end if you stick around, and it's only for the participants that are here present with us today. So please don't share that link with anyone else. And yeah, that's pretty much it for our little spiel. And then I'll quickly introduce Ryan. Thank you again for being here. We're so excited to chat. I'm really excited to chat today, because we haven't really had that many mentors on who have are founders of or who work for agencies, and who are representatives in that way. Ryan started Melody Haunts Reverie, which is his independent sync licensing company, in 2018, and represents current artists across multiple genres, including, in addition to growing a vintage roster. and pitch music for placements in TV, film, ads, trailers, and promos. So this is your chance to ask him questions and hear what he has to share about representation, which is a very helpful tool for independent artists who might not have the time or resources to make individual connections with music supervisors, and want somebody else to do that for them, which I think a lot of us could relate, are busy and working on music and other things to build our careers. So sometimes it's hard to do that as well. So that's what agencies are here for. And yeah, Ryan, go ahead and fill in anything I missed. If you want to give us a little background on yourself, that would be wonderful.
I will. Well, hello everybody. As I mentioned to Jordan right before this started, I figured I would give just a little bit of the background of my background and kind of then, bring up some of the main points that I wanted to about the benefits of sync licensing representation. But then I figure, I don't know, at least the last 20, 30 minutes, I would open it up to questions. So Jordan, just if for some reason I'm yammering on and lost track of time, if you want to just chime in as a reminder, because I don't want to run out of time for people to ask questions, and I figure people's questions will lead the remainder of the talk.
Sounds great.
Um, so well, I've been working a little bit about my background first, partly because I think my perspective is a little different than at least a lot of the other people I've met in my sync licensing or, music supervision world in general. So, I've always worked in entertainment. I've always loved music and film. So, I moved out to LA in 2001 to work in film, and I was kind of on that path for a decade. I worked for a talent manager and then for a talent agent at CAA, and then at a production company at Sony Pictures that was kind of head up or tied to director Sam Raimi, and then director David Fincher became a big part of that business. And I was a development executive there for years, and I was there until that company, kind of went away after some 7 years. And at that point, so that was basically a decade in LA pursuing that. And long and short of it is, I kind of didn't want to head in that direction anymore. Um, Specifically, film development. There's a lot of wheels spinning, and it was just, I kind of turned a page in the new year. So I started, I really didn't know anything starting out. Always I've loved music, but I didn't know anything really about the business. Like I definitely didn't know what publishing was in the music sense, just for an example. So took all these UCLA music extension classes, which I'm sure some of you have taken before. And if not, I can say that, they were all very beneficial. I took like 7 classes and I started temping. And then I worked various jobs. The longest I was in film music at Universal Pictures for a couple of years. And after that is when I kind of became more focused on the sync licensing representation side. So I was at Epic for a little while, then that department kind of went away. Then I was an independent contractor working for this guy, Ryan Gaines, who has a company called Mutiny Recordings. And I shout him out especially because he taught me a lot of what I kind of knew at the onset or learned initially about sync world and about pitching and about all of that. But I was an independent contractor that ended. And so, my plan was always to have my own independent sync company or independent company and then sync company. So I just decided that was kind of, this was the universe telling me it's time to start now. So, it's been 5 years since I kicked off Melody Haunts Reverie as sync. Um, when I signed my first artists. And I've kind of been, barreling slash plugging along ever since. And it's been an interesting kind of period of time, of course. Well, most of my business has been and relationships are in the film and television space. And of course, the COVID era, that all shut down. So that was, 3/4 of a year that there wasn't much happening. the strikes. And then currently I'm here in Connecticut. I moved back to the East Coast, which is where I'm from, to help out my mom, with some health issues. So now I'm in this like little kind of island of my own in sparkling Milford, Connecticut. If anyone other than Jodalyn knows where that is, but not far from New Haven, like 2 hours outside of the city. Um, and that's kind of my little spiel, but that leads me to sort of, I guess, the main points that I wanted to make about, from my perspective, about sync representation. So part of the reason that I give that spiel is because it's not like I worked under, the like big sync companies or sync folks at publishers or labels for years and kind of was really in the trenches with those folks. It was only like a year and a half of experience that I had total before I started. So it's been a lot of learning as I went, trial and error, and definitely learning a lot. Like I've learned a lot, and so I'm here to share what I can with you all. But I definitely don't think I know everything or even a fraction of everything. But I've certainly learned, a lot of stuff, and I have some strong opinions about, let's say, specifically sync licensing representation and what is critical in that space. Um, and in thinking about kind of how to, just how I wanted to present the information for this panel, there were two things that really stood out. I'm like, okay, just as an overarching structure, like how am I going to kind of lay out this information? And it really came down for me to two things. You can call them by other words, but I'm going to call them relationships and reliability. And of course, these two things are inextricably linked. But I'll, speak upon those two things in terms of like, well, what that means in the sync representation space, what I'm talking about anyway, that I've learned is by far just kind of what it's all about. And of course, a lot of this stuff, mind you, I presume a lot of you will know some, if not a lot of the stuff, or will have already presumed or had firsthand experience with a lot of things I'm going to mention. But that's where, the comments and questions can come into play, and we can kind of fine tune the conversation. So on the one hand, with the relationships, that's really the obvious thing, but I really can't stress enough how critical that is. Well, and I also want to note that I'm really speaking from the perspective of an independent sync licensing company that is not, for example, Greater Goods or some very big, well-established independent sync company. But I'm definitely not coming from the perspective of established music publishers, major labels, or even established indie publishers, indie labels, because, that's very much, in my opinion, a very different scenario versus indie folks, indie artists that, let's say, nobody's heard of, and getting their music into the proverbial hands and ears of music supervisors. So the relationships, I mean, that's really what it is all about in terms of having not only the connection to music supervisors and, music executives at, studios or networks, i.e. the people that are responsible for overseeing the music placement and the media, whatever it may be. Having those relationships is really what it's all about. And actually, an easy way to kind of immediately draw into my second point is a huge part of establishing and building that relationship is with respect to that reliability. So what I mean, especially relationships, is kind of cut and dried in terms of, well, what is that? That's friendships or business connections with these music supervisors over really, built over time, over long periods of time, years. I mean, I'm seeing certain things, people I've known, I've had acquaintances with for years that only more recently have come into fruition as like there's some business being built from it. But that reliability is I think the most important thing that a music sync rep can provide, not only for the music supervisors, but then also for the artists that they're representing. Um, and by reliability, I mean, on the one hand, let's say the quality, even though it's somewhat subjective, but the quality of the music that the sync rep is putting out there into the world, but also the applicability of that music to, let's say, briefs. In particular, music supervisors send out searches, aka briefs, whatever, and they ask for X, Y, and Z. And sometimes that's really clear and cut and dried. Other times it really doesn't make any sense. I mean, in terms of like, at least, let's say, to many of us recipients, like, well, wait, they're referencing this, but they're also referencing that. And they're talking about these qualities, but those don't seem to match up with these other qualities that they want, whatever. So we need to try to interpret what the needs are, and then provide them with what we think are the best options. And that's inherently challenging, but that's obviously a skill that sync reps kind of develop. And when they're sending music to music supervisors, you definitely want that music to feel relatively on point. Because again, with regard to the relationships and the reliability, if somebody is sending, well, wait a minute, what is this music Ryan is sending? This is like way left of center here. Search number 2, they send out, Ryan once again send out stuff that doesn't make any sense. Well, it doesn't take much for kind of the proverbial bridge to get burned in terms of, listen, he is kind of wasting our time. Let's pop him off the distribution list. Similarly, with respect to that reliability, is all things to do. I mean, I'm a really huge proponent of everything that has to do with metadata when sending out music. So that means the obvious kind of stuff in terms of very obvious, just the basic information, the artist, the song title, and like most critically, who the music supervisor would connect with, would reach out to license the song. But there's a lot more that, um, you know, maybe a lot of people don't necessarily do, like all the songwriter info, the respective PRO and IPI info, the splits, like having that all in the metadata. Granted, a lot of there are music supervisors who may not think to look at that straight away. They may be like, oh, what are the splits on this? Or they may ask you a question that could have been answered in the metadata. But bottom line is, you want to have as much of those critical details in the metadata as possible. And a good sync rep should have that in there. I mean, I'm also a stickler for myself, honestly, especially, but for music supervisors' benefit, I'm assuming, to have like lyrics to all of my songs, just because I'm better at, my brain isn't a computer. So if something comes in like, oh, I know what it is, like immediately, songs A, B, and C, that's not, I mean, it may be that, but if it's anything more than, okay, what could work for this? I use I use disco, and I've used disco always, and I'm a huge proponent of it. But I use the various search functions in disco to look up stuff, particularly if there's a lyric that's referenced in the brief. I don't want to have to rack my brain over at this point. And I don't know how many. I just passed the 4,000 track mark in my disco library. So, I mean, that is to say that in instrumentals as well, but whatever, it's a lot of music. So I want to be able to, as quickly and accurately, hone in on what what it is that they need. Um, and I'm saying all of this, but all of this is to say that, let's say, for an independent artist who is a relative unknown, whether that's a relative unknown in just the popular music space or in the sync licensing space, the and I'm sure there's certainly exceptions to this, but I think as a general rule, the likeliness of them being able to bridge the gap to, let's say, the wider world of music supervisors alone, and in terms of having that access or these relationships, being able to kind of have the sort of skill to distance themselves from their own music, let's say, and put really just what the music supervisor is seemingly asking for versus what you think they should have, or based on just what you want to send. And really having, even if a lot of folks use disco, but even then, how many of them may not be checking off all the boxes that I'm referring to that I think are really critical. A lot of people don't do it, mind you, but and if someone wants to license a song, if they don't have the splits right in front of their face, or if they don't have the lyrics, well, they can ask me for the splits. They can use their ears to determine some of the lyrics, or they can ask a question. But I kind of try to give that all to them from the onset, and it's something that you'd like to think your sync rep will be able to reliably provide time and again. And yeah, and that's kind of where, and that's definitely where the relationship grows, because let's put, in the optimistic viewpoint, oh, Ryan sends us, like, there's folks, I have relationships with certain folks I always get searches from. I do my best to kind of submit songs, and nothing has landed yet. But I keep getting the searches, and we've conversed. I'm like, hey, is there anything I should be doing better? I ask them. I don't do this often, but I ask them, and the short answer was no. And they even had things that they liked, but nothing really kind of worked out yet. Worked out at least to the point even of where they were coming to me to have a make a quote request, but they're still sending me the searches. Um, and that's kind of the name of the game, to either be able to receive these searches from these music supervisors, or otherwise have access to them to proactively present, hey, so and so, here's some music that I think may work really well with for the show that you're doing, or this movie that you're doing. Or I don't know, if I know them really well, I might be like, hey friend, I know you like this. I don't know if it's going to work for any of your projects sync wise, but you may dig it. um that kind of thing, because that's really all that, at least in my experience, the sync world is. It's receiving searches, getting music as accurately and effectively in response to these searches that you can. At least for all independent folks, I think it's a lot of proactivity. You've got to reach it. You've got, always, it's not like I know all the music supervisors, definitely not. I'm sure, nobody does, even though that is a kind of relatively finite number, at least in, let's say, the United States. It's still, I don't know that anybody knows all of them. But always kind of building relationships to new people, and spending time at figuring out ways to do that, and kind of paying attention to the projects that they've done and what they're doing, and having an approach to kind of reaching out to them. Um, and one thing, that I learned, from that guy, Ryan Gaines, that I worked with, for example, a very simple but a critical thing is, like, to do that proactive work, to always provide a playlist of some kind, whatever it is. It could be a sampler, it could be something specific to a project, but just like kind of give that, as opposed to the, hey, what are you working on, or how can I help you sort of query that. To ask that, or to make that kind of comment is good, but to also kind of give them something without having to get a response, or without asking them what it is that they want, just so they have it, because then they have it, they can access it, they could choose not to. um, but yeah, because all of this also comes down to, one of my other colleagues, a woman named Melissa Chapman at Groove Garden, she once said something about, oh, how every sync was like a miracle. And that's definitely my opinion and my experience. And by that, I think she meant, or I interpreted it as, not literally miraculous like manna from heaven and here it just plops down in front of you, but you've got to put all of that work into it. And for, to kind of, let's say, from soup to nuts, to have the relationship enough to get the brief, to hopefully have music that applies and send that music appropriately and accurately, for the music supervisor to like it. I mean, to think that it makes sense for what it is that they're looking for. Because we also have to remember that the music supervisor, it's not about like what they want. It's about what what their creative kind of bosses want, the director or the showrunner, or the exec producer, the editors, whomever. Um, at least generally, in my experience, that's what it's about. It's not about like, the music supervisor making their own personal choice about a song, even, for any given spot. It's really in conjunction and collaboration with these other creatives on the production that they're working on. So it's a matter of them digging the song and then like, oh, this works. This song for mine works. Let me add that in, send that over to whomever. Then it's about them responding to it as well. Oh, I really like this. Yes. And then to come back and to actually be able to, not too complicated thing, mind you, with independent artists, because, there aren't major big deal publishers involved or whatever, maybe no precedent involved. So it's a little, it's flexible, but still to be able to then make the deal. And then even after, I'm not sure how many folks who are listening are aware, but typically, a quote request will come in that is to say, oh, we want to use this song, and here's kind of what the basic terms are, and here is the fee, to see if you approve of it. And let's say I approve of it. Well, so then, I mean, it could be days, could be weeks, could be months before you even find out if it lands ultimately, at which point you will get like a confirmation. I mean, I had a sync and it was exactly that. On day one, let's say I got a quote request, and on day literally, I don't know, 90 or 120, I get a confirmation. And then it's like another 90 days furthermore to get the payment, which is then the other thing. Then when you get these syncs, to have the sync representative sort of have all the P's and Q's lined up to get the information accurately over to the folks so that you can get paid and to be able to follow up with them in a timely but not annoying way so that you can, get your money. These, the bottom line is, it's really a full-time job to try to kind of get these sync placements with any, regularity for anybody. And of course, that's what us sync licensing folks are doing. So, it's kind of all over the place, I guess, but that's a bit of at least initially what I wanted to put out there, in terms of the importance of and what a music sync licensing rep provides. But before I go any further, I guess, are there any questions, specifically about anything that I've said so far that I can kind of elaborate on?
There was one that I grabbed from before, that someone was asking. I've heard mixed info about whether to put in names of artists that are like similar or sound alikes, I guess. Because there could be lawsuits if it's too close to the song. Do you like to see references of artists, sound alike artists, I guess? In
Well, oh, is there another part to it?
No, I'm just wondering, is that in the metadata then that they're talking about possibly?
Well, they may. I mean, about that. I'll say then a couple of things. So for myself, for example, for Melody Holmes Reverie, like I don't rep sync artists. I rep, I don't want to say, I just want, I mean, I rep artists who exist irrespective of sync, right? They put out music, whether they're tiny or bigger than tiny, but they put out singles and EPs and albums, and they play most of them live. And even if their sync placements is their absolute dream, the music is not being made with the explicit purpose for sync placement. So to that end, part of at least the angle that question seems to come from, like, none of this music is being made to sound like, none of the music that I rep is being made to sound like anything in particular, or at least if it is, it's not on the up and up for me. Like, hey, Ryan, here's songs and that are very similar to this. Like, that's hasn't really been a thing. Because yes, I do think if it's too similar, if its song has been constructed with the purpose of sounding very similar to artist X or song Y, yeah, it could be problematic whether or not you label it as such in a tag. But putting that aside, because that just, like I said, doesn't really fall into my personal world. No, otherwise references. I find it really so. I mean, I'll admit one thing. I'll admit is, despite my kind of long music love, and at least, I mean, in some respects, I have a lot of music knowledge. I mean, as far as just music I love, not I'm not a musician, mind you, so I know really nothing when it comes to the real nuts and bolts of production, songwriting, music theory, or anything else. But I just love music. But having said that, it's not always easiest for me to be like, oh, who does so and so sound like? And for me to immediately know, it's like this and it's like that. Like I got to put work into thinking about how to best present that. But that is to say that it is helpful to put out there to music supervisors, like, hey, everyone, we're we're thrilled to announce we're working with artist X, and like I may not put this in a social media post, but for the purpose of music supervisors in an email, I would say anything. Yes, if I can, I will do my best to liken the music. It's in the vibe of this, or influenced by these folks. Recommended if you like those folks. It's definitely helpful because it's such a huge part of the challenge is having having these relationships, but then to get the music supervisors to listen to the music, that in and of itself is no small feat. Because they've got so much, they're crazed. Let's just say, as a general idea, like they're really busy, they're working on multiple projects, they are getting some version of inundation from folks like me and others, um, whether it's unsolicited or solicited. Let's say they send out a search. Now, I don't purport to know how everybody works differently, but they send out a search, I don't know, 20 people, dozens of people, whatever it is, half dozen people even, and then they're getting that many responses back. Well, that's all the music that they need to get through. And that's just in response to a specific time sensitive need. As a more general level of like, hey, here's a new artist I signed, you want to incentivize them or inspire them to be like, oh, it sounds like so and so, let me check that out. And even if they don't listen to it for 3 weeks, 3 months, for them to do whatever they do, maybe because everybody, I don't know what everybody does, but maybe they'll put it in a particular folder, or they'll download it and they'll put it in, over here or over there. But the point is to do sync licensing reps to do the best job that we can to help supervisors know what the music is before they actually spend the time to download or stream that music, by virtue of providing examples, is definitely really helpful.
Great. Let me see. There's one other question here, or a couple more. Um, what is the business model at your company? Do you represent an exclusive roster of artists, and take a percentage of any sync fees you can land? What about back-end royalties?
Yeah, so I am non-exclusive, and yeah, I've always been. Well, and I can speak in terms of, I can speak on that for a second, if people are interested in terms of the exclusive versus non-exclusive, which probably people are. But yeah, so and I think, as maybe many of you already know, and I don't know if there's an exception to this, I'm not aware of one, but with these independent sync companies, it's only are taking a percentage of the sync fee in the event that we land a sync. Let's say if it's a non-exclusive deal, in the fact that we land a sync, if I land a sync for one of my artists, I take a percentage of the sync fee, and then that's it. There is no royalty participation whatsoever. Um, Now, other folks may have some kind of co-publishing deal that may kick in if they get, if they get X amount of syncs in a year, $10,000, $20,000 worth of syncs, then some kind of co-pub um, stipulation, kind of comes into effect, and then they're a co-publisher on the song or something. And I'm aware that that happens. That's not me anyway. So yes, independent only, percentage off the top. Oh, and the thing that I was going to say that I presume most folks know, but it's not really acceptable or at all the norm for artists to pay a sync rep, like pay to play kind of thing. That is definitely not a thing that most people do, or that is acceptable, that is frowned upon. So, I mean, to be totally frank, it makes, it's not easy. It's not easy. I mean, like I have, if I don't get syncs, you aren't getting money, but furthermore, it's kind of my full-time job. So I'm not getting money. Um, Even though I've got a bunch of artists, in the same boat where I'm pitching their stuff. And, of course, some don't get pitched a lot because it doesn't, music is very specific. Others do, yet, things don't land, or, it's kind of like the wild west as far as that goes. But, but if with regard to the exclusive versus non-exclusive, um, my opinion about it is, so the real short is, for the sync rep, there's no downside for, I don't think, for us sync reps to have an exclusive deal with you artists. Like there will, like, I don't know what the downside would be for us. For you all, and I'm just talking about independent artists, let's say solo solo artists, sole songwriter, it's a one person project, and I rep a bunch of those. Um, if I have an exclusive deal with you, well, that means that, they can't have anyone else try to pitch their music. They rely entirely upon me. And and it's kind of like, I mean, I've only thought in more recent times that it's interesting to me in that that means there's only one party pitching their music versus, let's say, most other folks will have, let's say, two parties pitching their music, because if someone is signed to publisher X and they're signed to label Y, in some version, they've got like two different sync parties pitching on their respective halves, whereas a one-stop indie artist who has an exclusive deal literally only has one person. It's all up to that one person to get those placements, or otherwise, just fate or whatever efforts the artist may make on their own. Um, so anyway, and there's no doubt that having multiple, I'm sure many of you know, or all of you may already know, but having multiple people pitching the same music can and does absolutely lead to problems. I have not had a problem, but if there are four, I don't even know how often this is the case, to be frank, but if there's like four sync reps all pitching the same handful of songs, and especially if this handful of songs is viable, for sync purposes, and without getting into that for the moment, but we all know there's a whole bunch of music over here that could be regarded as sync friendly, for lack of a better term. But then there's a whole bunch of stuff over here that would virtually never get placed. I mean, whatever, experimental music concrete or something weird. I mean, way left of center, bizarro stuff. Quite frankly, it's just probably never going to get placed, but this other stuff does. So if you've got like four people pitching the same stuff, invariably it will become that they're pitching to the same music supervisors. They're like, oh, I got this song from Ryan, and I also got it from, Joey over here. Uh, what do we do? Who do we go to license this? Um, Stuff like that happens. I guess, I don't know, often enough. It's never happened to me, but it happens, so it can get complicated. But having said that, I don't think there's really any problem with having a couple of different entities pitching an artist's music under a non-exclusive agreement. At least it hasn't been for me, because also, furthermore, the artists I rep, they're all pretty unique. If it was some super hot of this right now moment artist who has a song that's blowing up, and independent sync rep A and B are both repping that song, yeah, that's going to get sticky. But that just really hasn't kind of crossed my path yet.
I have a question to kind of piggyback off that. It Do you ever run into artists who, like folks here who maybe would be, since people here might be more generally more knowledgeable about making relationships with supervisors and the whole sync world, do you have artists who would ever want to do some of their own pitching alongside you and work as kind of a team in that way? Or are most of them kind of just hands off, or do you not deal with that kind of collaboration essentially?
Well, yeah, I don't. It hasn't really. It's only come up a few times with me, and actually, funny. Like one of my artists, I don't remember the circumstances. Well, let me just preface it by saying that, at least to my knowledge, none of my artists have anything but maybe a handful at best of relationship relationships, i.e., even acquaintances with music supervisors. So it's just kind of not a thing. But when like one of the artists, I don't even remember what happened. Somebody referred him to somebody directly to a music supervisor, and they told me, "Hey Ryan, I'm going to pitch. I got this, and I was going to pitch I was going to send my music to this person for this show they're working on." And that was fine. I do appreciate knowing that. I definitely appreciate having the knowledge, and to kind of build it up furthermore. Like if an artist signs with another sync agent, I would like to just be aware that that exists, that that's happening. But yeah, they're free to, of course, do what they want because that's the nature of the non-exclusive deal. But yeah, to your point, Jordan, yeah, I just haven't really come across that yet. But I don't think it would be a problem, particularly if an artist that I rep actually, has some strong relationships. Um, yeah, I can definitely see myself collaborating with them in some way. Yeah, I'd have to actually think about it too in terms of how that would work because they may have some relationship with a music supervisor. I got this search. I wouldn't necessarily want to tip my hand to them and give them all the information when they didn't get the search, and then they end up submitting their music themselves, and kind of, I don't end up becoming a part of that process. But certainly it can be done, I think.
Hmm. Cool. It's good to know. Um, Someone else asked, for artists in other countries registered with their country's PRO, does this pose any problems when it comes to sync placement and payment? So working with international PRO companies. Have you
Oh,
run into that?
was the first part of that if
Um,
they are registered
yeah,
with their
if they're
PROs?
yeah, so if somebody's lives in another country and might be registered with, let's say, PRS in the UK rather than BMI or ASCAP or one of the US companies, would that cause any
Yeah.
issues with payment if they got a sync placement in the
Well,
US?
to be honest, well, so there's a simple answer with respect to payment if the question is referring to the sync fee payment, which is no, no, it's not a problem. It's all the same. I mean, because I don't know, certainly, yeah, I think more than half of my roster is not based in the United States, and it doesn't make any difference. However, with respect to royalty collection, so in truth, I mean, I don't know a lot about the inner workings of the PROs, or even the more simple workings of the PROs in terms of collection of royalties. Like how exactly does it work? I don't know. Um, but of course, like a PRS, if someone is registered with a PRS has its kind of, I don't know, ASCAP affiliate, and in and I don't know if it's ASCAP or what, but they have these relationships with PROs elsewhere throughout the world, and there's that kind of cooperative effort with respect to the collection of royalties. Um, but the short answer that I can answer confidently is just in terms of the sync payment, no, it doesn't make any difference. Um, and I don't know if this is a question or not, but yeah, with respect to getting paid for syncs, yeah, the sync representative, we kind of do all the stuff, but we will get paid that fee, and then we will pay you, the artist, the remaining percentage of that fee. Maybe that's obvious, or maybe everyone knows that, but versus there's no version where the payment goes to the artist and then the artist pays the sync agent. it's the opposite of that.
Yeah, great. That's good to know. Yeah, I think the PRO situation is can be kind of confusing and mysterious. They do what they do, and as long as you're doing the giving the correct information, hopefully it all works out in the end.
Yeah, that's
Um,
kind of definitely been my that's been my well, that's been my my awareness has been what kind of what you're saying, Jordan, in terms of really how they work. But that's why at least I try to get, well, I don't try. I mean, I really want to make sure I've got like the songwriter IPI and the publishing entity IPI, just whatever,
mhm.
just that I have that, because ultimately that is needed. You get a sync, and that is the way through which you will ultimately get those royalties.
Yeah,
Um, if you're not with a PRO, it's just going to be a lot harder.
yeah, and it's probably worth keeping up with your PRO account because I have heard of like, artists getting kind of lost in the mix, or maybe you're not, I don't know if you've experienced this, but like payments taking way longer than they should, and maybe you have to kind of like get on their tail about things sometimes and be an advocate for yourself if there's, I don't know, I have heard of things like that
Yes,
happening, so it's probably
I've
worth,
definitely heard that too. Yeah.
yeah. Um, Another question. If we're looking for representation, what's the best way to start that process, and how do you prefer to be contacted?
Well, so that's and I think I saw, and I was trying to just see some of these chat questions. I think I saw that in there, and that's an interesting question because, well, again, just from my perspective. So first of all, I don't like kind of actively take unsolicited submissions per se, because I'm a one person band over here, and whatever, it's just a lot of work. So I'm not trying to get flooded with unsolicited inquiries. And with all due respect to myself, I'm not like king of the hill, so it's not like people are inundating me with like, oh my god, Melody Haunts Forever, so it just whatever, I get them very infrequently, randomly. But having said that, I mean, it's funny, and at least in some way, I think it really depends upon who you might be reaching out to and just whomever is receiving that email, whomever specifically is receiving it, and like what their policy is. But like for me personally, I've gotten X number of unsolicited, emails, and it's never like a priority to look at it if I don't know what it is. Sometimes I've gotten unsolicited inquiries, and I happen to know what that artist is, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Or if there's something about it that is catching my personal attention, in terms of like a genre or something. But I mean, certainly there's something to be said about reaching out to sync reps via email to introduce your music. I will definitely say when doing that, to it's critical. It's a necessity to have it be kind of personalized. And I don't mean like, hey Ryan, here's my music, but for someone to have obviously done their homework in terms of like who it is that the sync rep works with, what kinds of music, bands, artists, like whatever information they could gather to try to make sense of, well, to try to make sense on the one hand of, oh, because I don't, it's not like I only rep this stuff. In theory, I would rep anything genre wise. There's no, because someone was asking that some questions about that, I think, in the chat, in terms of like what I rep or would rep. The short answer is it could really be anything genre wise. Um, it's not very helpful, but it's true to say that for me personally, it has to be music that I am personally, it either has to be music that I personally am invested in, and or it has to obviously make sense for sync, or I think it makes some sense for sync, but that I also have a connection, or a connection is able to be formed with this person. So most of the music that I rep is music that I was a fan of months, years, a decade ago. And then I end up repping, because I reach out to them, or one thing leads to another, we connect, and then the rest is kind of history. Um, and with all of that sort of stuff, when it comes to at least opportunities that come together, I'm pretty open minded with folks I would work with. I'm a little bit more picky now in terms of I really have to think about, because again, I'm only one person. So I really have to think about like, okay, does this music make sense for the sync space, at least the sync space that I'm working in? Like, do I really think I'm going to have a lot of opportunities to pitch this music, whatever it is, even if it's my favorite music of life? If the answer is no, really, probably not. Unfortunately, I kind of have to move on to the next thing. But now on the other end of that spectrum, like, okay, I really see how this music works or would work for sync for all kinds of reasons. Let's say just up tempo, lyrically, instrumentally, for commercial. I don't mean strictly commercial, but more commercially viable. A lot of opportunities, great. But like, I kind of hate this. I mean, it's just really not for me. I'm probably not going to rep it. If it's not really for me, but I end up connecting with them, such as it's just not exactly my personal cup of tea, but I end up getting referred to these folks. And again, I would say, with respect to how to reach out to people, definitely references, referrals, that is, i.e., relationships, is really critical. Um, Goes a long way, of course, because a publisher friend of mine referred one artist to me. I ended up signing them. She referred someone else to me recently. Um, and that, first of all, I'm not going to ignore that. That will get addressed simply because of the relationship I have with the person who referred them to me. Um, and quite frankly, because at least it seems, it's not like, oh, this is garbage. No, like like these people that I'm friends with or have relationships with, they work with quality music. And so even if it's not like exactly what I'm going to go listen to in my free time, I really like, oh, this is quality. I dig it. And then I'll want to connect with the artist. And invariably, everyone that I've ever, they're cool. They're all very earnest, and I'm happy to work with them and try to kind of get placements for them. So the short answer is, I think emails are a good way. And I think emails over, by the way, emails over any Instagram DM. I don't know that anyone would say that they would prefer a DM in Instagram or something. And I'm not including Facebook, because Facebook is whatever as far as I'm concerned. So it's just not really, I don't really utilize it. So email, but definitely if you can get a referral, and then if not, like I said, to personalize it to to the person that you're submitting to, is helpful. Well, and to the point of, I guess, that you'll be getting to in a minute, because we're almost done here. But I mean, in-person networking is still very much, even in this virtual world, is a really critical, valuable tool. Now, for myself, for example, and maybe like Joe Lynn, and I don't know, whomever else who are not in a New York City or a Los Angeles or a few other places, may not have so much opportunity for this, but I do think in-person networking, so whether going to showcases, having showcases, or just being out in the world. I will also say I'm not affiliated whatsoever, but like joining GMS, the Guild of Music Supervisors, as a friend, which is the level of membership where you don't have to be a music supervisor. I don't even know what it costs. I think it's like $100 a year, but it's definitely, you get invited to. There are definitely in-person events that are 100% worth going to, and in-person networking is still a really critical tool to meet folks and get your music kind of like, oh, I rep, I'm an artist, or just connecting that way.
Yeah, that's a great thing to remember, since it is there are still a lot of opportunities virtually, but the in-person stuff is important as well. And Rebecca, maybe you want to take this moment to talk about the sip and soup. That's a good transition. Oh, sorry, one second. Is that working?
All right.
Great.
I guess I was unhosted. So if you're interested in the sip and soup, it's going to be with Jordan Young, music supervisor, with Love Island, and Two Indie and Pandion Music Foundation is hosting it. And I'm putting the link oops, in the chat right now. And I'm also going to include in the chat a little bit about the studio here in Venice Beach, California, Earth Star Creation Center. And that's the location. And it's a lot of fun. Like I said, if you're in LA or if you have the capability to fly to LA for a little sunshine, usually there's sunshine, come over, join us Friday night. Like I said, Sonnet Simmons, if you don't know her already, is one of the founders of 2 and she's the one that will be performing 2 songs that night, solo performance, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And like that's when Ryan and Jordan were talking earlier, or Ryan really about socializing. That is a place to socialize, and that's where you meet the supervisor and other people. There's going to be some industry people that John Kleinbill is inviting along with Sonnet Simmons. So it's going to be a great group of people this Friday night. I highly recommend you guys join us if you can. And yeah, join us next Wednesday for another workshop, right, Jordan? And at 11 a.m. Who's
Yep.
the host? Who's the mentor?
That's gonna be, oh, I wanted to say, sorry, I gotta double check, make sure I get the right, John Newcomer next week.
Okay, perfect. And then on
Yeah.
Tuesday, don't forget, you guys, is our wellness, mindfulness, Pandion Unplugged, where you can get guidance through, mental health or wellness, and that's live on Instagram and Facebook. Ryan, Carroll, do you want to share any of your cool Instagram information, or how to connect with people? Not that you're taking random, submissions, but just to say hi. People can look you up, see how cool you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, just Melody Haunts Reverie is, and it's, well, and as I'm sure some of you know, whatever the name was born from, personally for me, it was a Roy Lichtenstein painting, but in the painting, the woman is singing "The melody haunts my reverie," and that's reference to a famous American standard song. But anyway, if you were to Google, the lyric was "The melody haunts my reverie," but it's "Melody haunts reverie," and as it turns out, that's a pretty Googleable triplicate of words, or words strung together, because that's kind of only me. But having said all that, yeah, the Instagram is best. um Instagram is best. Oh, and I would also just say for your in-person event, um and for you all, on the one hand, I would definitely go if I was there, number one. The guy who's the host is a friend, is like a friend of mine, this guy Jordan Young, and he's definitely one of the nicest guys. He's definitely one of the nicest um, folks that I've met in the business. He hasn't been a music supervisor too long, a few years, but he kind of went headfirst into it, and he's been really busy with it ever since. He was doing sync representation before, actually. So if you go, he obviously has a lot of insight about both of those things. But he's just a really nice guy. And this is also, I'm saying all this just off the top of my head. I'm not affiliated with anything, but I definitely value the in-person happenings, and I do miss them, because the fact is, yeah, just not a lot of that in Connecticut, at least not directly relating to the business. So if you're in Los Angeles, mostly, quite frankly, in LA, but also in New York, and of course also to some degree Nashville or Toronto, whatever, if there are events, yeah, I would definitely go to them.
Great.
Yeah, somebody asked about scholarships, spots. We at this point, because 2ND is the one that is mostly hosting it, and we are just partnering with them, you would have to contact 2ND for that, if there's any scholarships. Also, there's always availability for future Sip and Soup volunteer options, so let us know. We could always take like at least 1 or 2 volunteers per each one. And Ryan, thank you so much. And
Yeah,
Jordan, thank
thank you. Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks for
Thank
giving me
you.
the
Thank
info
you
too.
for having me. Yeah, I'm hoping it was helpful and it wasn't too
Definitely.
all over the place. But yeah, anyone, certainly feel free to, well, follow me, drop me a line there, and you can DM me there, and then we can email from there. But yeah, I'll check my message requests and stuff. So I'll make sure to see it.
Great. And here's that disco link one more time. If anyone wants to drop their song in, one song for Ryan. And again, Ryan, no obligation to use any of them, but they'll be there for you if you end up wanting to check them out, and then also accessible for other supervisors and agents
Yeah,
who use
and
disco.
use your best song, your best radio ready song with all your metadata.
Yeah. Thank you again, Ryan. That was so great. Such good
Oh,
information, and
sure.
I'm sure people got a lot out of that. So thanks for sharing your expertise and experience.
Thank
And
you.
I'm
Thank you
sure
for
you'll have
having
some
me.
messages. Thank you, of
Yeah.
course. Thanks for being
Thank
here.
you, everybody,
And
for
thanks,
coming.
everyone. Yeah, thank you. Have a
Sending
good
everyone love.
All right.
rest of your Wednesday. See ya.
Bye.
So long.
Bye.